think we're,
Yeah.
All right.
1 minute.
1 minute to showtime, okay.
Light's not on yet, Steve.
It is on.
It is.
It is on?
You need to get those glasses, Jack.
You're on.
There's several more coming.
No, I'm sure.
Say, this person, George, wants to speak first. This is on number 5 now. This is
Okay,
not
yeah,
the
I
last one. These are the only ones that I've gotten so far that have said they want to speak. These folks in this clip have said they, either way, didn't say. These folks said no.
Okay, all right.
No's, don't know.
What is this one here? This is a no. Okay.
That person is the one that submitted it
That you
to
sent
us
me?
early,
Okay,
so.
all right, okay.
Bring a water bottle. How come your water is empty? Bring a water bottle.
I didn't even bring a water bottle, I should have. Okay. Call the meeting to order, October 5th, 2022, Seminole County Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. My name is Steve Smith, chairman for tonight's meeting. If you would please stand in for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. This board is a 7-member board appointed by the Board of County Commissioners. A quorum has been established to hold tonight's meeting. Public hearing items acted upon by this board are referred to the Board of County Commissioners for further consideration. Board members, myself, Stephen Smith, we have Richard, we have Bob Turnage, Carissa, and we have Dan, and we have Tim, and we have Walter down the end.
You only do that under pressure.
I know. And then staff, we have Rebecca Hammock, Director, Mary Markowitz. I don't see Mary.
She'll be here shortly.
Okay. Paul Chipak, our attorney. Bill White, engineer. Doug Robinson, principal planner. Annie Silloway, senior planner. Tammy Brushwood, clerk to the PNZ. Tonight's meeting will go as follows. Staff will introduce the item. The applicant will present the item. The audience members wishing to speak will then be heard. Please make sure you complete a comment card and give it to the clerk prior to speaking. Comment cards are located in the lobby. Audience speakers should restrict their comments to information directly related to the item being heard. Audience speakers will have 3 minutes to speak, or 6 minutes if representing a group. When called, speakers should approach the microphone, hand their comment card to the clerk, if they haven't already done so, and provide their name and address for the record. The board may ask questions of the speaker. After all speakers have been heard, public comment will be closed. The applicant will be given a chance for rebuttal. Any items shown, such as video, presentation, pictures, or maps, must be left with the clerk for the public record. Items shown from electronic devices should be emailed to the clerk. A motion will be made and seconded. Board discussion may occur and conclude with a vote. I will request a roll call vote for any split votes. So the first item on the agenda tonight, I need a motion to accept publication.
So moved.
All approve? Aye. All right. And I need a motion on the approval of the minutes from the previous meeting.
Make a motion to approve the minutes?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And motion carried. We have a technical review item.
Good evening. I will be presenting Celery Cameron preliminary subdivision plan, and for the record, Annie Silloway, senior planner. The applicant is requesting approval for the Celery Cameron preliminary subdivision plan on 34.19 acres located on the southwest corner of Celery Avenue and Cameron Avenue. The PSP is proposing 123 single-family residential lots with a maximum density of 3.60 dwelling units per net buildable acre with a minimum lot size of 5,500 square feet. The development is within the Orlando Sanford International Airport navigation easement area. The applicant will provide an navigation easement at the time of final plat. The PSP complies with all the conditions of the Celery Cameron Final Development Plan, Development Order, and Chapter 35 of the Seminole County Land Development Code. All internal roads will be private and owned and maintained by the HOA, and the utilities are provided by the City of Sanford. Staff recommends approval of the preliminary subdivision plan for the Celery Cameron subdivision.
Thank you. Is the applicant present? Would you like to speak?
Chad Moorhead with Madden Moorhead and Stokes, 431 East Horatio Avenue. I'm here to answer any questions on this and the next item.
Does the board have any questions? Okay.
No.
All right, thank you. Any questions for staff? Motion? I don't think this is a public comment item, is it?
Move to approve.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Doug Robinson with Development Services. For the next item, we have Eden Preserve Preliminary Subdivision Plan. The applicant is requesting approval of the Eden Preserve Preliminary Subdivision Plan located on Eden Park Road, approximately 300 feet south of Bunnell Road. The subject property is zoned R1AA and has a low-density residential future land use designation, which allows a maximum density of 4 dwelling units per net buildable acre. The preliminary subdivision plan proposes 17 single-family residential lots on 7.14 acres with a maximum density of 2.38 dwelling units per net buildable acre and a minimum lot size of 11,700 square feet, which is consistent with the R1AA zoning. The PSP complies with all the required conditions of Chapter 35 of Seminole County Land Development Code. The Eden Preserve subdivision will be accessed from Eden Park Road, and Seminole County is the utility provider for water and sewer. Staff recommends approval of the preliminary subdivision plan for the Eden Preserve subdivision containing 17 single-family residential lots on 7.14 acres. And that concludes my presentation. If you have any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Is the applicant present?
He is.
Oh. Would you like to, anything to add? Any questions?
Motion to approve?
Motion?
I'll second.
I can't make it. You can, who made the first?
I made the
Oh, you
motion
made
to
the first,
approve.
Dan?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Item 3 has been postponed again. So, Paul, we need to take a,
Yes, it was previously advertised, so do a motion for consideration of continuance.
okay.
Okay. I'll make a motion to continue this item to a future date uncertain, or are we considering
It's a future date uncertain.
to a future date uncertain?
Okay.
Yes,
All right.
and when they come back in, they will need to be re-advertised and notification sent out again.
Yeah, those were all the folks that were here at the last meeting,
Yes.
correct? And it got postponed? Okay.
Yes.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. All right, item 4.
Hi, good evening. Annie Silloway, Development Services. I will be presenting the 46A Atlantic Drive Small Scale Future Land Use Map Amendment and Rezone. The applicant is requesting a small-scale future land use map amendment from mixed-use development to industrial and a rezone from C2 retail commercial to M1A very light industrial in order to develop the subject property as office warehouse. Subject property currently has a mixed-use development future land use designation that is under FLU Policy 5.5, which allows a maximum net density of 30 dwelling units per net buildable acre and a maximum intensity of 0.60 floor area ratio for non-residential uses. The intent of the mixed development future land use designation is to provide appropriate locations for mixed-use development sites or multi-parcel areas to encourage flexible and creative design to protect established residential neighborhoods. The subject property is located behind parcels that are currently owned by the same owner and have the same use of office warehouse. The only access to the subject property is through the above-mentioned parcels owned by the applicant. Based on the size of the subject property and adjacent uses, the subject property is not an adequate site for a mixed development. By changing the future land use from mixed-use development to industrial would allow a maximum FAR of 0.65 for the proposed site. Based on preliminary aerial photo and county wetland analysis, there appears to be approximately 0.26 acres of wetlands on the subject property. At the time of site plan, if there are delineated wetlands on the site that will not be impacted, the applicant will be required to maintain a 15-foot minimum, 25-foot average wetland buffer, and a topographical survey showing the wetlands area will be required at the time of site plan review. Water service is through the City of Altamont Springs, and water capacity is available to serve the proposed development. On-site septic system will be used for any future development of the site. The applicant will be required to maintain a 25% open space requirement at the time of final site plan approval, and buffers will be determined at the time of final site plan and will be in compliance with the Seminole County Land Development Code. Staff finds the proposed industrial future land use designation and M1A very light industrial zoning classification to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. Staff recommends the Board of County Commissioners adopt the proposed ordinance enacting a small-scale future land use map amendment from mixed-use development to industrial and a rezone from C2 retail commercial to M1A very light industrial for a proposed warehouse development on approximately 2.76 acres located northwest of Atlantic Drive and south US Highway 1792. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? All right, is the applicant present?
I think so, yes.
Do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, but I'm here for questions if needed.
Any questions for the applicant?
No, it seems pretty straightforward.
All right. Is this a public hearing item?
Yes.
Yeah, this is.
Do we have anybody from the public that would like to speak in regards to this item? All right, seeing none, a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move we recommend the Board of County Commissioners adopt the proposed ordinance enacting a small-scale future land use map amendment from mixed-use development to industrial and adopt the ordinance enacting a rezone from C2 retail commercial to M1A very light industrial for approximately 2.76 acres located northwest of Atlantic Drive and south US Highway 1792.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? Not hearing none. Motion?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay, and we are on to item number 5. I've got a statement that I'd like to read prior to this coming up. On February 12th, 2008, the Board of County Commissioners, are these all speaking? Okay. The Board of County Commissioners approved the Creekside Acres plat recorded at Plat Book 74, page 1, as required by Land Development Code, Section 30.109, optional cluster provision, along with the plat. The board approved development order number 07-055-00040 on 3 tracks for the project on 6,406 acres. The development order is recorded in OR Book 6928, page 1018-1026, and provided for a perpetual open space easement to be executed encumbering 1,117 upland acres on Track 1 and Track 2. The open space easement is recorded out in OR Book page 6928, pages 1027-1043. Furthermore, the entirety of the 5,057 acres of Track 1 and Track 2 are owned by the St. John's Water Management District and are currently utilized as an open space park. Pursuant to Seminole County Land Development Code, Section 30.109, optional cluster provision, the development order allowed for the development of Tract 3 as a subdivision with a maximum of 300 units. Provided an additional 40 acres of open space conservation is granted on Tract 3. The proposed subdivision preserves an additional 232.92 acres of open space conservation on Tract 3. The developer is currently in review for a proposed preliminary subdivision plan for 300 residential lots on 1-acre minimum lots under the review process of Chapter 35 of the Seminole County Land Development Code. Under the development order, the development is entitled, the developer is entitled to construct up to 300 single-family residential dwelling units on 1-acre minimum lots. Under the existing comprehensive plan provisions, these 300 lots must be on individual wells and septic tanks. The purpose of today's request is limited to whether the development can be constructed with a private central water system. The developer has proposed a comprehensive plan text amendment, amending the text of the future land use element of the potable water to provide a limited exception to allow a central water system to serve up to 300 units on Tract 3. If the text amendments are denied, the proposed subdivision may proceed through the development process with the utilization of 300 private wells. Today's discussion is limited to the proposed text amendment changes to the future land use element and to the potable water element, which currently do not allow for new central water systems in the rural area. Any discussion regarding the establishment of the 300 units in 2008 utilizing the optional cluster provision as reflected in the Creekside Acres Plat, the development order, and the open space easement is irrelevant to these proceedings tonight. So this is strictly water. We've got to try to stay away from the discussion about the homes because it has nothing to do with tonight's agenda item. So that being said, Mary.
Hey, I made it. Good evening.
How are you tonight?
Welcome.
Thank you, and thank you for reading that statement into the
you're
record.
welcome.
So, good evening. For the record, Mary Moskowitz, Development Services. Item 5 is, and I may be reiterating some of the things that you mentioned as well. Item 5 is a request from the applicant for comprehensive plan text amendments to the future land use element and potable water elements in order to utilize a private central water system for the development of a 300-unit single-family residential project with a minimum lot size of 1 acre outside the urban service boundary. The project is located on approximately 1,313 acres on the east side of Snow Hill Road, approximately a quarter mile south of Old Milton's Road within the east rural area. Per the future land use element policy FLU 11.10 and potable water element pot 4.2, new development outside the adopted central service area shall not be designed nor constructed with a central water system. The proposed amendments would provide an exception to this policy specific to the subject property, with the condition that the developer would fully fund the private central water system and create a central water nonprofit corporation. The proposed central water nonprofit corporation would be responsible for the operation, maintenance, repair, upgrades required by regulatory requirements, replacement, and, if needed, of the private water system. The subject property has a Rule 5 and Rule 10 future land use designations and a split A5, A10 rural zoning classification. The A5 and A10 require a minimum lot size of 5 acres and 10 acres respectively. However, the A5 and A10 zoning classifications allow for optional cluster provisions for subdivisions consisting of residences sited on 1 acre lots. In the A5 zoning district, the overall net density of the project, including the land contained within the open space easement, shall not exceed 1 dwelling unit per 5 net buildable acres. In the A10 zoning district, the overall net density of the project of 1 dwelling unit per 10 net buildable acres may be increased to up to 1 dwelling unit per 5 net buildable acres by utilizing the cluster provisions. The density bonus may be awarded based on the amount of buildable land preserved as open space. A project can be authorized for up to 2 dwelling units for each 8 buildable acres of land that are preserved under the open space agreement. On February 8th, 2008, Seminole County issued a development order 07-055-00040 on 3 tracts for a project known as Creekside Acres on approximately 6,406 acres. The development order provided for a perpetual open space easement to be executed encumbering approximately 1,017 acres of upland on tracts 1 and 2. Furthermore, the entirety of the approximately 5,557 acres of Tract 1 and 2 are now owned by the St. Johns River Waterment District and are currently utilized as an open space park. Pursuant to the Land Development Code, Section 30.109, Open Cluster Provisions, the development order allowed for the development of Tract 3, which is the subject property, as a subdivision with a maximum of 300 units, with an additional 40 acres of open space conservation tract. The proposed subdivision preserves 232.92 acres of open space conservation on Tract 3. The proposed PSP for the 300 residential lots on 1 acre, as previously mentioned, is currently under review by staff, subject to the review processes of Chapter 35 of the Land Development Code. Under the previously referenced DO, the developer is entitled to construct the 300 units, residential units on 1 acre minimum lots. The purpose of this request is limited to whether the development can be constructed with a central private water system. If the text amendments are denied, the proposed subdivision may proceed through the development process with the utilization of 300 private wells. Per Flu 11.14, C2, the county shall protect groundwater systems in the rural area, including the Geneva freshwater lens, by relying on small individual wells to disperse downdraw associated with excess pumping of the aquifer. To address this, the applicant submitted a hydrological report, and you're going to forgive me, I'm going to screw up the pronunciation. This the initial hydrological investigation of the Yarborough Ranch Tract 3 property prepared from Andrive Engineering. The completed report has been included in your packets. Per the report, the St. Johns Water Management District issued a consumptive use permit in 1984 for livestock and irrigation with a 23.8 million gallons per year to support flood irrigation of the 200 acres of rye grassland and pasture for the stock watering. A 4th renewal of this CUP was issued in 2019. And the groundwater source for this is a 10-inch well with a depth of 200 feet and pumps about 700 to 800 gallons per minute. A 10-inch diameter well is currently being used to pump as a water source. In addition, there are approximately 8 additional 2 to 4-inch wells on the property for livestock watering and domestic use. Based on the adopted level of service requirements for 300 homes at 250 gallons per day, the expected annual domestic use for the project is 27.4 million gallons a day, about 15% more than in the existing CUP of the 23.8 million gallons for the property. The hydrological investigation report concluded proper well design will minimize downdraw, so the potential for upconing will be minimized. Pumping rates can also be reduced by optimizing the on-site storage. The total volume of groundwater pumped can be minimized with conductive use of stormwater, surface water, and groundwater. The report included a series of recommendations for additional analysis and test. The report was reviewed by the St. Johns River Water Management District, which concluded, based on the review of the report provided by Andrive Engineering and our understanding of the site and regional hydrology, the district believes that this site, in this specific instance, a central water system will provide more benefits than individual wells would. A detailed response to that report is included as an attachment in your package. The applicant, per the Seminole County Environmental Services staff, the applicant has provided sufficient information to address concerns and demonstrated that the central water system, as proposed, would be more beneficial than individual wells, given the regulatory compliance requirements and agency comments. For fire protection, per the Florida Fire Code as adopted in Florida Statute 633.202, the Seminole County Fire Department requires an approved water supply capable of supplying the required fire flow for protections to the proposed development. The specific requirements for the code shall be permitted to be altered by the authority having jurisdiction, in this case that would be Seminole County, to allow alternative methods that would secure equivalent fire safety, but in no case shall the alternative afford less fire safety than in the judgment of the authority that would be provided by the compliance with the provisions of the NFPA code. Currently, the Seminole County Public Safety staff does not know exactly what methods of fire protection are being proposed, but hydrants as well as a new fire station have been requested and are required. Under the Comprehensive Plan, Policy FLU 11.10 establishes methods to provide potable water outside the urban service area. This policy states that new development outside the central water areas shall not be designed nor constructed with central water systems. An exception could be considered if it's demonstrated by the applicant or the State Department of Health that a health problem exists in the built area that is unserved. The Seminole County Comprehensive Plan defines a central water facility treatment plant as a large water system facility that provides service to a number of customers over a broad area. The applicant's proposed text amendment limits the proposed private central water system to their development with no ability to expand. The surrounding properties are existing rural residential homes using wells, vacant land, or conservation preservation lands. The proposed comprehensive plan text amendments would allow the development that is not typical of a rural lifestyle and dissimilar with the surrounding development in the area, as none of the properties utilize a central water system. However, there are other developments within the rural boundary that have been constructed with central water systems that were constructed prior to the adoption of the policy language prohibiting the central water systems in the East Rural area. Under Objective Part 4, the county shall consider the extension of lines or increased facility capacity with adjacent municipals and private facilities as a means of discouraging urban sprawl. One of the policies of this objective is Policy Part 4.2, which establishes methods of providing potable water outside the urban service area. And it states new development outside the adopted central service area shall not be designed nor constructed with central water and/or sewer systems. Again, the applicant is proposing a private water system. Generally, infrastructure drives growth to urbanized areas by providing services that support residential development. Policies that limit the location of infrastructure to within an urban area can provide proactive approaches in guiding growth away from rural areas. However, the applicant is seeking to limit the negative impacts associated with sprawl by limiting the proposed central water system to the area already entitled 300 dwelling units by prohibiting the ability to expand the system outside of the subject property. Issue 4A, potable water of the East Seminole County Rural Area Plan, and this was from August 1991, and sometimes referred to as the 1991 Rural Plan, stated that the roles of central water facilities in altering the existing rural character of East Rural Area was discussed. The issue of how to provide a reliable source of safe drinking water to the rural area without creating infrastructure that depends on growth and required urban development to support it was considered. The 1987 Citizens Advisory Committee and the Board of County Commissioners in 1990 concluded that individual wells would be the preferred method of providing potable water to the area. The only exception would be given if the central water system was needed for health reasons. Staff does not support the proposed text amendments because the request for the new development, this is a request for new development, and the applicant has not demonstrated a health problem as required by policy FLU 11.10 and Issue 4A of the 1991 Rural Area Plan. Therefore, staff recommends that the Planning and Zoning Commission make a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners to deny the transmittal of the proposed ordinance enacting the comprehensive plan text amendments, amending the future land use and potable water elements of the Seminole County Comprehensive Plan. That concludes my report. I am here to answer any questions. I'm going to drink a glass of water, though.
Any questions for staff?
Mary, the comp plan, in general terms, at a high level, states that the county needs to find ways to conserve water, correct? I mean, in more than one place. it
Yes,
states that.
there are several policies that refer to that.
And it also says in there to protect the Geneva winds, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And lastly, I think it also talks about protecting the aquifer, among other things, okay? I read all their engineering reports and other consultant reports, and to me, it clearly accomplishes those goals of the county, which are clearly stated in our comp plan. So I don't understand, other than a political consideration, maybe, I'm not sure, what am I missing here? Why do you guys see it differently and hang your hat on something from 1991?
Again, the policy in the existing comprehensive plan and from the 1991 policy provide an exception for the expansion of private water systems for new development only in the case of health concerns, and that's the only exception that's provided in the code.
I understand, but they're asking for a change, which sometimes we do all the time.
It is a policy decision, but again, what the code states right now is the only exception is for health reasons.
Okay, so you really can't answer why staff doesn't consider the goals and the policies in our comp plan to be more important, really, than some 1991
Well, that policy is also in the existing comp plan as well, in
Okay.
FLU 11 point, yes.
Okay, but you still didn't answer my other, but that's all right. I guess there is no answer.
Mary, you made a comment about fire.
Yes.
What would be the requirement of the developer is when it gets to fire?
So in the least technical terms I'm going to be providing for you, they need to meet the NFPA standards.
Okay.
There are many ways to meet those standards, one of them having hydrants,
Okay.
but there's also other methodologies that the fire marshal can approve alternate methods as long as they meet the NFPA.
So would the present fire station in Geneva be adequate to support that or not?
They are requesting an additional fire station.
Oh, really? Okay.
But there are other methods of providing for fire suppression in
Okay.
addition to hydrants, and you can do, sprinkle of the building, you can use shallow wells, so there are other methods.
So the fire station that they would be requesting would be on the burden of the Seminole County taxpayers?
They are requesting a dedication for land for a fire station.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
I want to clarify, I had the opportunity to read some of the comments on the comment cards from those who I guess don't want to speak. And I just want to clarify that I understand that the 300 units are granted, right? That's not an issue tonight.
Correct.
But on top of that, also the clustering is granted. That's not being undone by anything. They can cluster. They can build 300 units without ever coming before this board. They would
Correct.
just drill 300 individual holes in the ground.
Yeah, I mean, they would come for the PSP approval, but they do not need any additional approvals from this board.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff?
I got a quick one. I guess the county doesn't have any concern about the cost of the plan, right? That doesn't fall on the taxpayers in any way, shape, or form. This is going to be strictly a private facility that's being built.
So the proposed amendment, and I'm sure the applicant can speak more to this, but it would be a private system and would be funded through the development, so.
So it's a more appropriate question
yes.
for the developer.
Yes.
Okay.
Tim, Walter? Anything?
The only thing I see is we're going to have 10 wells, or 300 wells, or going to have one big one.
Well, that's a question I'd like to follow up with Mary. So, Mary, what would stop them, if I bought a house in there, what would stop me from putting an irrigation well so we could have 300 irrigation wells on top of the potable water well? Is there anything that would restrict that irrigation well?
We would have no policies that would restrict that.
Okay, so we could still have 300 wells on top
Not
of,
necessarily, I mean, that's an applicant question, Steve, really.
yeah. Paul?
There would be, again, as it goes through the development process, the ability for the developer to put a covenant and restriction on the property of no individual wells if they so chose to do that.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Is the applicant present?
Yes, Mr. Chair. And I have a presentation. Thank you, Mary. Just to address a couple of the questions that were brought up for clarity, when she's saying they are requesting a fire station, the applicant is not requesting a fire station. The county fire department has requested the donation of land from the developer at no cost to the fire department. We're not asking for a new fire station. Your fire department is doing what they should. They're out there looking for free land to have another fire station. And the other is fire hydrants only work if we have a central water system. We can't put in fire hydrants on private wells. And then with regard to the last question, if you look at the proposed text language with regards to the central irrigation system, we do in fact already offer a restriction that it's actually item number 3 in our text amendment. There shall be a separate metered irrigation system that relies on stormwater reuse system as the primary irrigation source, with surface water and groundwater supplementing irrigation during dry season. So that is being written into the comp plan, and it will be enforced by our private water system. It will also be enforced by the county through the documents they're requesting, and also through the Water Management District, because as part of us getting this central water system CUP, we're agreeing to these items, which include that we will have a metered irrigation system. So I wanted to.
I don't want to interrupt, but could you give us your name and address?
Oh,
for the
I'm so
record?
sorry. I'm Rebecca Wilson. My address is 215 North Eola Drive. I'm with the law firm Lowndes. And we also have with us Dave Axel, who is the applicant, representatives from Pulte Homes, and also John Hauk and Ray Jones with Andreev Engineers, who are really the experts in what we're here to talk about tonight. So if you have questions that stump me, I will certainly turn it over to them. As Mary mentioned, the Yarborough Ranch was at one time 6,406 acres. The Yarborough family has ranched this land for generations. In 2008, an agreement, actually a quite innovative agreement was reached that eventually ended in the conveyance of over 5,000 acres of privately owned land to the St. John's Water Management District. And that also has, on top of it, an easement to keep it as open space in perpetuity. On the map that's being shown, those are, I don't know if this has a pointer, but Tract 1 is in the middle, and then you see Tract 2 further to the southeast. So all of that land is now part of preserved open space and wetlands. And as a result of that agreement, the Yarboroughs continued to ranch Tract 3, which is 1,360 acres. That development order, again, it was approved in 2008, as your staff explains and as Paul would explain. These 300 units, these 300 homes are now entitlements that run with the land over those 1,360 acres. One of the requirements that we'll have to show to you when we come back with the PSP is that each lot must be 1 acre or greater, and we also have to show you how we provide for the required open space. Of that over 1,300 acres in Tract 3, 802 are the net buildable. So today what we're here to talk about is really, and you all clued into it quickly, is it better for the county, the environment, the aquifer, and the new residents of these 300 homes to have private wells, or instead which is what is written into the comp plan now, or instead, with better information and data that we have from 1991 until now, is there another alternative that is better for the aquifer, the county, and these residents? So I want to note that in 1991, Seminole County was grappling with how to control, as Mary mentioned, urban sprawl into the rural area. And when you read what was suggested in 1991, it wasn't based off of science to conserve water. It was based off a limitation to try to limit development. Since 1991, you all have done, the county's done several things to limit development in the rural area. One of those things is the 2004 Charter Amendment protecting the rural area. Another is the deal they struck here. In 2008, they agreed to allow 300 homes in exchange for over 5,000 acres of preserved land. And since 1991, both Seminole County and Central Florida have had a much more scientific approach at looking at how to preserve water resources, particularly the Geneva lens, and how to conserve water. The amendment that we're proposing, and I appreciate that it is lengthy, and that's because number one, we didn't want to set any precedent. We don't want anyone in the rural settlement, the rural area, to ever look at this and say, well, they got to have central water, we should have it too. We made this very specific to only this piece of property, and only because it had dedicated conveyed Tract 1 and Tract 2 to be preserved as open space in perpetuity. Another thing we agreed to is that we could only build and design this central water system for the 300 homes. There will be no additional capacity. There will be no lines that are run to any other areas of the county. As I mentioned, this includes stormwater reuse for irrigation and a separate metered irrigation system. We ensure an adequate funding source. I think that was one of the questions as to whether or not this would cost the county taxpayers money, and it does not. Not only do we have to fund the initial capital expense to build it, but we have to put in place, to your county attorney's satisfaction, that we have a mechanism to assess these homes for any future capital expenses. One of the other great things with a central water system is that the system has to meet higher standards for water safety than if you have an individual well. So I don't believe we're going to find any experts who disagree that a central water system is better for the environment than 300 individual wells. For example, when the county asked the St. Johns River Water Management District, and this email was included in your package, they responded, the district believes that in this specific instance, a centralized water system will provide more benefits than individual wells would. Key factors that the district sees as beneficial to the resource for the centralized system are as follows: separate irrigation system, these are the dual lines, increased recharge wetland hydration, and the well septic setback, and the inference is that is also increased. So some of the other benefits to the central water system that we've provided in the hydrology information is that this implements water conservation measures not available with private wells. So with a private well, as you all know, no one is monitoring how much water you are drawing from the aquifer. I grew up in South Alabama on a private well. And instead, with a central water service, we're going to have a tiered rate structure, right? Once you use over so many gallons of water, you start to have to pay more and more. Also, again, the metered central irrigation system. The conservation manners also, as we say, reduce the aquifer withdrawal, better protect the Geneva lens, enhances nutrient reduction. Again, that's by using the irrigation that first comes from storm water. Reduces surface water runoff similarly, and increases the wetland hydration. As I mentioned, public safety, this requires compliance with the federal and Florida safe drinking water, for which wells are exempt. This also reduces the number of holes in the intermediate confining unit, which reduces the possible downward transport of contaminants to the superficial aquifer to the upper Florida aquifer. The central water system will be located on the northwest part of the property, where the freshwater lens is the thickest, as opposed to distributed throughout the project. This, to me, is one of the most compelling statistics. So if you have 300 private wells, you yield approximately 3,770 square inches of hole in the superficial soils. Instead, when that's combined into a central water system, you're only puncturing those superficial soils at 113 square inches. With regard to the 1991 methods of providing infrastructure, potable water, I went back and looked at it. That was created by Gladding Jackson. I think many of us remember that firm, that planning firm, when it existed in Central Florida. And when you read it, what they're really grappling with is not how to conserve water. It's not how to provide better drinking water. It's how do we prevent growth in the rural area. And so it says the issue is how to provide a reliable source of safe drinking water to the rural area without creating an infrastructure system that depends on growth and requires urban development to support. Well, we're not creating a system that requires more growth to sustain it. Instead, as we've shown, the water system is more reliable than the private wells. It has safer drinking water. It's not growth dependent. We're already going to build 300 homes, and I want that to be abundantly clear. I'm going to, and I would just say, I think it is an ill-advised gamble against that if you really care about the aquifer.
Folks, please.
The CWS does not require urban growth in this instance. It is simply supporting the 300 units that are already approved. Also interesting, the county already has 3 pretty significant central water systems in the rural area. Seminole Woods, approximately 262 homes created in 1978. I believe those people enjoy a rural lifestyle. Mullet Lake Water Association, created in 1971, approximately 300 homes. And then Lake Harney Water Association, created in 1965, approximately 200 homes. So if you see, we have the Mullet Lake is in purple, Seminole Woods is in yellow, Lake Harney is in red, and then we added the land that would be in it for Yarborough. To me, it looks pretty consistent with the existing central water system's sizes, both geographically and the number of homes. I would just leave that with the request. We're asking for this to be transmitted to the Department of Economic Opportunity for further information. If the DEO disagrees with this, I'm sure they'll have the opportunity to comment and let us know. So we're asking simply for that recommendation to transmit this. The next stop in this would be, it goes to your board, similarly to transmit to the DEO. I'm happy to answer any questions that you all may have. I really appreciate it.
Board?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
You made a couple implications or even statements. You said the water from a central processing plant is safer than well water. Do you have any studies of that in Seminole County supporting that claim?
So what I believe I said is that it is safer because it is required to meet federal and state safe drinking water standards, and wells are not required to meet those standards.
But you have no evidence that our well water is
I have
any
not
less?
claimed
Okay.
that any well water is not safe.
Okay, I want you to point that out. I'm on well water, I've had it tested. It is better than any city water I've been on. Thank you. Also, watering restrictions. You said that the central processing plant would allow you to restrict watering. In Seminole County, Paul in particular, that's not how we enact watering restrictions. Again, I'm on a well. I'm subject to the same restrictions as anybody else in Seminole County, watering in the summer 2 nights a week. And that's enforced by the sheriff's office or the permitting department.
Yes, the watering restrictions, again, apply to the individual user.
It's not monitored by a central water plant or anything else.
No, it would
Okay.
be through code enforcement actions.
And if I can respond, the difference is when you're having to pay for that water that you're using for irrigation, you're probably not going to run your sprinklers right after there's been a rain because you're having to pay for that water, and that's what we're talking about.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
I have a question that's similar to that. And drawing on some of the comments that I read from the citizens, is there any evidence or research to suggest that the central water system would make any of the other wells on other people's properties less safe for drinking?
I'm not aware of anything. I think where we were going is just the opposite. When we have one organization, the water not-for-profit being created that oversees that single system, it is a safer system than when you have 300 wells and the 300 different holes and abilities for contaminants to move back and forth.
So it should have minimal to no effect on neighboring wells? for
Oh,
other area
correct.
wells.
Well, to clarify, you already have a water with a cup.
We already have a cup
So they're using water
for,
withdrawal.
I think it's about 25 million already being used for the agricultural purposes. And I think that's a really good point you're making. You know, I've seen some of the social media posts that claim that this property is, pristine. It is quite beautiful, but it is an active ranch being used for cattle and growing rye.
Did I hear you say somebody read that we might exceed the consumptive use permit by volume? So how do we address that?
So we will have to go to the St. John's Water Management District and receive a new cup for the central water system. And along with that, as part of that CUP, that's where a lot of these other items will be enforced, not just through the county, but, they're going to want to see that we are enacting equal to the county or greater conservation of water. I mean, even things, the Water Management District will go so far as even to, require certain types of landscape so that we can show that our intent is to conserve water.
And then the depth of the production well, is that going to be different than the depth of, I didn't look through Andreev's, but are you talking about two different depths for the volume you're drawing out of a production versus?
That was one that was going to stump me. Let me.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Ray Jones, Andreev Engineering. So the zone that you would be pulling the water from would be the same. It's basically right now, it's a 10-inch well and it's 300-foot depth, and the casing would be similar, and we would be looking at a similar zone to withdraw and extract water. The difference is that you'd have 300 4-inch wells, and I, like you, have a private well as well. My water's not so good, but you can still treat it. The benefits are that really you have, the Water Management District is going to cause some controls to be put in place. DEP is going to be put some controls and restrictions in place that will ultimately, we hope, to make the water safer, better. And also, the biggest part of the consumptive use permit is conservation and trying to use alternative sources of water. So if we're using the available stormwater runoff to help irrigate, we're reducing nutrients, we're helping to improve the balance that occurs on the site and remove less groundwater than is currently or has at any point removed groundwater.
Okay, can you explain to me, let's go back to the, how are you going to retain all this water that you're going to use for irrigation?
Well, if you'll notice that there's a large system already in place. I'm not a civil engineer. I'm just the hydro guy. The civil engineer is
He'll be here for the PSP.
So there's going to be two separate systems. There's going to be a potable water system and an irrigation system?
So there'll be ponds, and I'll try the best I can to give you this information, but there'll be ponds where runoff from the development will go into the stormwater ponds in accordance with the regulations and requirements of Seminole County and the district ERP. These are wet ponds, and they will be more than likely oversized, and they will be able to contain a certain amount of water, which will also then be used to be pumped from as a source of irrigation. And the only reason that a central system becomes a benefit in that situation is that you have those dual lines. You can take that water from these ponds and you can distribute it onto all the lots. If you have only an individual irrigation well, there is no dual lines. The dual lines don't exist, and that way there is no reason to try to conserve and utilize an alternative water source. So that would be another, just technical benefit of a central system.
Okay, so if these retention ponds that you put in that are going to be adequate for all the stormwater runoff, if we get a dry spell and they're all dry, what are you going to irrigate with at that point?
Correct. And that's where the backup...
What are you going to use?
Yeah, the
for
backup
irrigating?
is groundwater, but you're not using groundwater all the time as if you are on just wells.
Okay, but
You're
you're still at some point going to use groundwater for irrigation?
You have to, yes, sir.
Is that in your calculations?
We will be forced to show that to the Water Management District because they will only allocate a certain amount of water, and they will have a conservation requirement and to show how much water in total we will be using, and then we will subtract from that total amount of groundwater that we need the amount of water that we can use in a drought situation for irrigation. They only give us the amount for the drought water that from the stormwater system.
Okay.
We run into the same thing with reuse. You'll run low on reuse in drought situations. It's in concept, you're managing it the same way.
Yeah, but the water volume that's coming out of the ground is not taken into consideration for the irrigation at this point.
Well, your individual wells can do whatever they want with irrigation.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, you
Now,
still
if
have
you're
to
on the
irrigate.
central plant, you're controlled by
I have private well.
You're controlled by the stormwater pond and central plant, similar to where we have reuse rationing when we get into dry spells. I'm just from a design standpoint in big systems.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions for the applicant?
Thank you, and Chair, just would want an opportunity to address any concerns we may hear from the neighbors.
I have one more question.
Yes, sir.
If you build this nice water plant and so forth and so on, and wanted to do 50 more units instead of the 300, how would I accomplish that, or could I accomplish that?
The existing 2008 DO restricts us to 300 units, so we're not building the central water plant for additional units. We're not going through all this with the Water Management District and the CUP for any additional units, just the 300. So I guess we'd have to change the rules, change the DO, find more land, change the CUP. I mean, it won't be done in our lifetime.
Thanks.
Mr. Chairman, point of clarification on that last question. The 300 units is based on a formula that all of the land area that you see up on the map and the upland developable acres equated to 300 units of that entire area of the 5,000, 6,000 acres, and that is collapsed and clustered on Track 3, and that's where the 300 units have come from.
Correctly. Yeah, correct. I'm aware of that, yeah. Yeah, and, all right, so we get into the public section of this. The, George Celery wanted to speak first, I believe.
He did.
Is that more speaking?
Yes,
Okay,
didn't say.
that's a...
These are just- no.
George Sellery, 5231 Shoreline Circle in Sanford. I'm on the west side, but this is really important. Text amendments to our Constitution are very important. They don't happen all the time. They happen very rarely, actually. And that's why they're here, because they want to change the Constitution. This goes back to 1991. The language is intended to ensure that land within the rural boundary stays rural with 8.3, 8.5, and 8.10. We all know about Rivercross. That was for the rural boundary. This is going to destroy the rural way of life within the boundary, and it's going to open it up to everybody else to come back and ask for the same exception. They might even hire her as their lawyer to come back and ask for another exception. So what you're being asked to do today is essentially destroy the rural boundary from within by allowing changes to the comp plan language, which were specifically written, word for word. There is no, like, there's an exception or something else. 1991, this started. 2004, the voters voted, and this has been a done deal. But developers want that land, even though with the hurricane, and that all may be flooded out there, who knows? The more you pave wetlands, the more that happens. This developer is asking to change our comp plan so that he can build, and I want to clarify this, it is not a guaranteed 300 homes. Mr. Chilcott can...
Sir, this strictly has to do with the water.
Right, but the whole
We're not going to talk about building homes.
Okay, that's what everybody's been talking about, but anyway, it was never guaranteed. And remember, every developer can easily find an expert to dazzle you with data and support what the developer wants you to do. They can hire a lawyer, they can hire everybody to exactly give their point. We can also get a lawyer and a water person in here to actually do our point, but we don't need to because the comp plan says it's not allowed, okay? You could be our expert on the wells, Mr. Turnage. You know exactly, they don't just abuse the wells, people out there abusing the wells like they want you to believe. If you vote in favor of allowing the language to be changed, your actions will establish, here's that word, trend of development, okay, that the Rivercross developer and others will ask for in the future, because they're going to say, why them? Why not us? Why can't we do exactly what they want to do? So we are asking you to vote no, and asking you, more importantly, to vote no unanimously. Kick this decision to the Board of County Commissioners who are elected to take the heat and who have taken the heat on the rural boundary issues. And again, protect the rural lifestyle. We've had changes that affected the west side horribly, and we don't want to see the same thing happen on the east side. So I really want you to please look at that development order and see exactly what it says, because it's not what she said. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Folks, we got a lot of speakers here tonight, so if we could refrain, I'd really appreciate it. Christopher Stevens. Good evening.
Good evening. Give my address and everything. This is my first time here.
Yeah, name and address for the record, please.
Christopher Stevens, 286 West 2nd Street in Chuliota, 32766.
Thank you.
It's my understanding that what I've read about the aspirations for this new development, that they're promoting, they want to build this to kind of show, kind of offer what would be the attraction of living in a rural lifestyle. And I think living in a rural lifestyle sort of includes having a well on your property. When it comes down to it, if it's not desirable to have 300 different wells on this property at the end of the day, that what was written in the original agreement when the property was sold with the Water Management District and everything, it was my understanding that it is up to 300 homes with a minimum 1 acre. If that's not desirable to have the 300 individual wells, it could be divided up different ways into larger properties perhaps. But at the end of the day, if we're living in the rural area and you're trying to attract people to move here into a rural area that used to be this ranch that Ed Yarborough had, or that he managed and with the cattle and everything, that sorry. I hadn't really had time to write something out, but I know that my grandfather came to these meetings a lot, and he, Stanley Stevens, came here, and he lives right down the road off of 419, has been living on a 5-acre lot in Riverwoods. He was on well water. He was allured by the rural lifestyle, and then had that rural well as well. So at the end of the day, I guess what I'm saying is, if you're putting these properties out, trying to attract people to live in a rural lifestyle, having a well is part of that, and having a big transfer, or having a big water treatment facility, I think honestly invites more development, and I think it sets a precedent. And it's not something that the people who really worked hard to set the rural boundary and everything really want to see.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ed Mason?
Yes. Ed Meeson, 2247 King James Court in Winter Park, Florida. I see 4 problems with what this was being proposed. Number 1, I do believe it is precedent setting. It's the camel's nose under the tent. Number 2, it pulls from the Geneva bubble. There's been many studies on that. It's a very precious and limited resource. What I heard was the language is that stormwater collection can happen. Probably should be shall happen. Should be stronger language if we're going to do this. And I'm sticking just to the subject of the water plant, not the overall development situation. Okay, water from the aquifer and into the homes is only half the problem. The water doesn't collect in the homes. It comes back out. It comes back out as wastewater. You've probably been reading about what we've been having problems in Winter Springs and Oviedo with wastewater and lakes and so forth and so on. So that is not addressed whatsoever that I can see with this proposal. Maybe that should be part of it. If it's so important to them to get the water into the homes and they want this development, maybe they should take care of the other half of the problem and what happens with the water out. Another big problem I see is private owners of the water system. We have to have water. You can't live in a home. It's not even legal to have a home without water. So what happens? We saw what happened when private companies took over insulin. We had to have an act of Congress literally to mitigate that. I wouldn't want to be dependent on some private company that could be sold, and then they turn around and go, oh, you want water? Oh, okay. Well, your rate just doubled. So I suggest you vote no. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Eddie Lee Banks, Jr.
My name is Eddie Lee Banks, Jr. I grew up in the East Geneva area. I live at 439 Snow Hill Road. The little bit I have to say from a layman's perspective is I grew up out there. All the developments in that area off of Snow Hill Road, I walked all those woods, there were very few people out there. When they first started developing and dug that one well, that one used to be an old orange grove, there was a little pond in there. I saw all that water leave from the east side of Snow Hill Road in the pond that was there and go over to that road. With your septic tanks, everything go back into the earth, into the aquifer. And everything from the east is going to flow north. So we are going to be affected by the building of those homes. So I can't agree. If you don't believe in global warming, go out in Lake Hunter now. Go out in Mullet Lake now. Go down to Sanibel Island now. This storm just showed us some more. So I disagree with the development of the home. I don't care about, I can't go along with somebody who don't believe in global warming. And a dollar supersede that. So thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, sir.
It might not mean much, but that's from a layman's perspective.
Thank you. Douglas Langolis? Did I butcher that up, or was I okay, thanks. Sorry about that.
Dennis Langlois.
There you go. Thank you.
I'm at 2385 Howard Avenue in Oviedo in the Black Hammock. And the short comment I want to make here is a lot of care and time was taken into this 2008 deal. And I feel like if the Yarboroughs wanted this central system, they would have asked for it then. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Nancy Harmon.
I'm Nancy Harmon, 752 Pioneer Way, Geneva, Florida. I'm speaking on behalf of the Geneva Citizens Association, so I'm asking for 6 minutes.
Okay.
I would really appreciate it if all the commissioners were listening. Thank you. I have read what the staff stated, and I've listened to what Mr. Germain had asked with regards to their questioning them as to why they can't look forward and why they can't allow a central water system in Geneva on this property. I've listened to what you've said. I live in Geneva. I have 2 wells, one's for irrigation of my pastures and one's for my home. I very seldom irrigate my pasture because I live in the rural community. I am not an urban person moving into a rural land. I'm not expecting to have Zoya or St. Augustine grass. I'm not expecting to water a full acre. I'm expected that when I live in a rural community, that I'm enjoying the rural lifestyle. Out in Geneva, we do not bring in the urban community, as you'll see in Alaqua, any place that you are looking right now, and Celery Avenue that's being built. It's rural, and we do conserve our water because it's the bubble, because we understand the importance of the bubble. To think that putting a water system in and charging people that are going to have money to move there to use irrigation, and if they have to pay for it, oh my God, they won't. Excuse my language, but I'm telling you, it starts with a B and an S. People who have money will spend the money to water their property. We see it all the time in Seminole County. With regards to, again, what the staff said, I just sent you, I gave you all a document. Today, 2022, there has not been one change recommended by the staff or the county commissioners ever to put central water in the rural boundary area or any other areas of Seminole County that allow for and require wells for drinking or irrigation. If you read the FLU, it says it's required that new developments outside adopted central service areas shall not be designed nor constructed with central water or sewer systems. Public and private central systems may be permitted in the future if demonstrated by the proponent of the system expansion, note system expansion, or by the State Department of Health or other public entities that the health problem exists in a built, that means already, public system like you see at Seminole Woods, Mullet Lake Park, or Lake Harney. They would be allowed, if there was a public issue with regards to water quality, to upgrade their system. That would be the only time that service would be allowed, according to this regulation. So let me just get, again, it's required for new developments outside adopted central service areas shall not be designated or constructed with central or sewer systems. Public and private central systems may be permitted in the future if it is demonstrated by the proponent of the system expansion or by the State Department of Health or other public entities that a health problem exists in a built but underserved area for which there is no other feasible solution. In this case, the service area expansion plan will be updated, but the future land use shall not change, shall not occur. Meaning, again, those places that currently have these water treatment systems can update, but there will be no change to the FLU, to the comp plan. All right, now, I also want to go back to this conversations with regard to, well, where this central system would be located. It would be located on the west-northwest side, which is where the bubble is. If you look at that property and where the bubble is, which they haven't shown, the bubble does not sit on all that property. And what that means is people on that property, if they are going to maximize their sale, they have to provide potable water, either through a well and have it treated like a lot of people. If you look at the people that live south of there, they all have salt intrusion in their wells, and they all treat their wells. We all take care of our water, and we all use it, as I said, conservatively. So this whole concept that this is better, if you're taking the water up there, all the people that live up there where you see those little houses, they could be affected because the water will be draining from the bubble that their wells are set at as well. In fact, at the ski lake, we had the same conversation, and that developer chose to state that he would in fact pay for wells that were damaged as a result of them putting in their wells. So this whole concept of this is like such a great deal for everybody, and it's conservation. As Ed said earlier, if you're going to talk conservation, let's look at why does it make sense to put 300 homes in an Econ River basin, a very protected area of Seminole County. It was a bad decision in 2008. It's a bad decision today. Please vote no.
LaDonna Tyndall.
Good evening. My name is LaDonna Tyndall. I live at 1306 Old Mims Road. My road is the one that's really going to be pretty much just devastated by all this, as well as our water. We do have a bunch of ranches and everything there, farms, active farms. That's what Geneva's about. I don't understand what she seems the problem is. We're already flooded out there. That's why these seats aren't covered tonight with a lot of voices, because they're stuck in their homes or they're drowned out of their homes. And it kind of makes me upset to know that y'all went ahead and with this meeting, knowing that we were all just very devastated out there in Geneva by this hurricane. So once again, you would see many of us sitting here to outdo her, but we can't, because they're sitting there trying to keep their homes afloat or to dig what's left out of their homes. This flooding has come from the building. Where I live on Old Mims, if you build, they will build up. It will flood us out even worse. To look across my front acreage and to see the back of a subdivision and know that when they have flooding, or all their trash and all their hoopla that comes with them is in my yard. And once again, my water is going to be devastated. My home will be devastated when flood times come, when these hurricanes come, because they will build up. They've messed in everybody's water system, well or not. Mullet Lake, we know that has been a disaster ever since it started. My sister's lived there for 42 years, and she can tell you it's a waste of money and time. Lake Harney Woods, once again, the water program is a waste of time. I know everybody that's lived out there. My family's lived in Geneva for over 9 generations, from the Geigers on down to the Stevens. And I'm embarrassed and appalled that Seminole County thinks it's okay to do what they're doing right now. It's not. And it's not okay to have this meeting when half the residents of Geneva that are involved in all this can't be here. Thank you for your time.
Joe Humphreys.
My name's Joe Humphreys. I live at 883 Cardinal Point Cove, Sanford, Florida. It's actually in the McIver River Basin. I come here today. I have kind of a unique set of experiences relative to this. I am on a number of HOA boards. I know what it costs to maintain retention ponds. Guess what? They're not free. Neither are water plants. I came here from Sanibel, Captiva Islands, Fort Myers. I've been on the phone for the last week talking to my friends, looking at developments that I did down there that have, if not washed away, damn near. I know what overdevelopment looks like. It hurts. It's going to cost this state billions of dollars for the foreseeable future. On Sanibel Island, we had a privately owned water treatment system. Last count, it served about 5,300 residents, 5,300 accounts. It used to be owned by the Mariner Group, which was a private company that I worked for. They got rid of it. It's now owned by the members. Why? Because it was a lost leader. Do you really think that 300 people who probably don't know how to maintain all those retention ponds that are going to go out there are going to know how to take care of a very high-tech water treatment plant? I spent 2 years on a little island called Usapa Island. It's near Cabbage Key, you might have heard of. We put in the first privately owned reverse osmosis plant in the state of Florida. It's not cheap. It costs money, and you have to have people that know what they're doing to maintain it. So who's the staff going to be staffing this plant? Who's going to be managing it? My brother was in the environmental remediation business and the water treatment business. You want to know what's expensive? Water treatment. It's gone up more in the last 10 years than inflation. So are they going to continue to raise the HOA fees in order to cover that plant out there? What point, when they get to the point where they have to start replacing very expensive equipment, ask our friends from the water department here how expensive it is to maintain the system in this county. It's expensive. So I'm asking you, I'm telling you, you're going to establish precedent, as you heard earlier. And you're not living in the real world if you don't think this is going to create a precedent. That's reality. It may not be legal, but it's reality in the development world. Trust me, I've been there. You will establish precedent, and you will destroy everything that this county has stood for. And it says in your comp plan, potable water element comprehensive plan requires potable water supplies outside of the adopted urban service area rely primarily upon individual wells. Let's stand on your Constitution. Thank you.
Thank you. Mitch Fortier.
Do you want to call up the next person as well, so they can start.
Okay, after that will be Joyce Jones. And then Katrina Shattuck.
Good evening. My name is Mitch Fortier. I live at 808 Vista Cove, which is about 1.5 miles from this property. And personally, I disagree with the density of the development, but I don't think that's something that we have in question here, is it?
Correct.
Well, that's a darn shame. Because there's nothing about that development that is rural. You're going to have a gated community, all right, so there's nothing about that that's rural. You're not going to have enough property out there for people to have barns and horses or whatever they want. It's just not going to work. But I think this board should do whatever they can to preserve the quality of the water in the Geneva bubble. Less than 8 miles away, just on the other side of the river, the St. Johns River, you've got a community there that does not have water, potable water coming out of their wells. They've got salt water. They have to have water brought in by truck. They have to have tanks so that they can have water to bathe with and to drink out with. They're paying for that. And personally, I think allowing somebody with cows and a sod farm to use as much water as they have is a crime. Because, just like you're seeing out west, the water source that we have, that's a finite source. Yes, it does get replenished by rain, but if you start abusing it and we start getting salt in it, there's no going back. And it's up to this board, in conjunction with the St. Johns Water River Management District and whoever else, to preserve that. Like I said, if you screw it up and you start getting water in there and you ruin it, there's no going back. And there's a lot of communities in this country, in Florida, that's happened to. So protect our water.
Thank you. Joyce Jones?
Hi. My name is Joyce Jones. My address is 873 Snow Hill Road. I live right next to the Yarborough Ranch. I have just one question. When they put this water plant out there, is there a way that the developer can guarantee that I will have no problems from the bill?
That'll be a question we'll have to ask them when we're done with the public section. How's that?
Okay, and so when we ask them that also, if they agree, I would like to have it in writing. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Katrina Shattuck? David Bear will be next, and then Deborah Julian will be the final speaker.
Katrina Shaddix, 1011 Seneca Oaks Trail, Geneva, Florida, 32732. I am the executive director of a nonprofit organization, Bear Warriors Unite, and the president of Sustainability Leaders Initiative, so I'm asking for 6 minutes. And first of all, so you have a packet of papers, but I want to bring up one counterpoint to the applicant. There would be no irrigation needed when you plant drought-resistant native Florida plants, so that's something you might want to think of to maybe go back to the drawing board.
There's only 4.
And second of all, not enough?
No.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
So in your packet of papers, the first is an article from 1990 about the 3 sisters, the matriarchs of the Yarborough Ranch. And if you look on the 3rd page, the last line should be highlighted. It says, while they are unsure how their children and grandchildren will feel about the property, they know one thing. They do not want to see the rolling 3,000-acre ranch turned into a subdivision. And the next papers are from a drone pilot that I hired to go over the Yarborough Ranch on Saturday. And so a lot of the flooding had subsided, but if you take a look, the wetlands on the property and the aquifer recharge areas did their job. The water was allowed to percolate back and down to our aquifer and the Geneva bubble. And if you see on one of the pictures, had there been 300 houses here with 300 impervious surfaces of, did you have a question, Steve?
Yeah, I need to stick with the water, not the houses.
Okay, so flooding on the
This is
land
just
is
about,
water. So if those 300 houses were built, that would create impervious surfaces, and the neighboring community right there would be flooded out. And a lot of these people in the room today, they would have had their houses flooded had the new houses been built. The next thing I want to bring up is the applicant is from Pulte Homes. And in September 2021, there was an article, Pulte Homes destroys 22 Florida tortoise burrows and pays a paltry penalty.
This ain't about water.
it's got to be about water, Katrina, please.
Okay, it's got to be about the history of behavior of this company that is applying to, again, ask us to break the rules. They've broken the rules, they've broken the laws, they're going to continue to do it. And when they kill 22 gopher tortoises, what do you think they're going to do with the rest of the land?
That'll have to
I'm
be
just
addressed.
saying.
That'll have to be addressed at a
This
different
needs to
meeting.
be addressed. They were fined, they broke the law. Now they're asking to change the rules in Seminole County. The other piece of paper is basically this whole thing is putting the cart before the horse. They're counting on getting 300 houses out there. They're asking for us to change the rules, to put a water plant out there, when in fact, I had to hire legal counsel to review the development order. Do you have a copy of that? If you want to take a look at it, it's from Attorney Leslie Blackner. And basically what she said, I'll let you read because she detailed everything that's wrong with it. She said, she described the development order as an Easter egg hunt of illegalities. The development order is what this comp plan amendment exception is predicated on. So because the development order is unlawful, the comp plan amendment asking tonight is also unlawful. So this needs to all go back to the drawing board. The DO has several things that have broken the law. And that's from an attorney. If you want to confer with her, you can. Now, for the good stuff, there is a positive to this. The Yarboroughs deserve to make money off their land. No one's denying them that. We want them to make a lot of money. They deserve it. It's wonderful land. But it needs to be made the right way. And it doesn't need to be made by a company that has killed dozens of gopher tortoises and broken the law. So one of those things, I've actually contacted the state, and it's a family ranch lands program, and they said the Yarborough property is the perfect example of something that they would like to buy and conserve forever. So I will be talking to the Yarboroughs to ask them to consider letting the state agency buy their land and conserve it forever, and it won't cost the county a penny, and they'll make money, and we won't have all of this animosity that you see here today with all of the Geneva and Chiliota residents hating the Yarboroughs when they're just trying to make money. So we can do this right, and everything can be a win-win, and we can truly protect the environment and our quality of life. Thanks.
Thank you. David Bear.
Good evening, everybody. My name is David Bear. I'm here as president of Save Rural Seminole, as well as president of the Lake Tuscarora Association. My address is 921 Tuscarora Trail. As has been pointed out, we're basically here pursuant to and under the framework of this deal that happened in 2008. A deal that brought a lot of land that was all owned by the Yarboroughs down to Tract 3. In exchange for that, they got $30 million. In exchange for that, they got...
Mr. Bear, can we please stay with the water system? That's what we're discussing.
I am 100% sticking with the water. You'll see. Just give me a little margin, please. They got $30 million, and they got the right to transfer development interest from those other parcels onto this. What they did not get, they did not get the right to build a central waste facility. 9 months ago, that's what they were here asking for. They no longer are, thankfully. They did not get the right to build residential units less than 1 acre. 9 months ago, they were asking for that. They're no longer anymore, thank you. They also, at the time, did not get the right to build a central water treatment facility. They are still here asking for that. If they wanted that extra right, that was the time to get it. When they, at the time, got $30 million, if they had wanted those extra rights or extra twigs, so to say, maybe they wouldn't have gotten $30 million. But instead, they're here trying to get that extra right for free. I don't think that's appropriate. They got $30 million of public money, and now they're trying to get something extra on top of it. The comprehensive plan is incredibly clear. You've heard the rule and the text read over and over. Staff did an excellent job in interpreting it. It provides for very specific exceptions as to when this can happen. This is not one of them. There's really no doubt about it. Rules are important. Text is very important. Those rules are there for land use planning. Land use planning is not just ad hoc, how do we feel at this moment? Well, this might seem like a good idea right now. Land use planning, legal rules are there to place guardrails and systems into place that everybody follows. That's exactly what we have right here. What are those rules about? Those rules are not about how do we preserve water. Those rules are about how do we preserve certain growth characteristics. So the applicant is here, and their strongest argument they've made is that they believe and they provided some evidence that this might preserve water. That's not what the rule's about at all. It's really irrelevant. The rules deter high-density growth, which ironically is the very reason that they're here. They're here to try to eviscerate the rule because they want to embark on this high-density development. The rule is there to deter that for them and for future development. Make no mistake, they might claim that this is not a precedent, but it doesn't take a lawyer to recognize that if one applicant is given an exception and the next applicant is not, that next applicant has a very strong legal case for, well, they were picking on me, they were prejudiced against me. Saying it's not a precedent doesn't really change that. The barrier that's in place here is on purpose to keep profit margins down, candidly. And why is the applicant here trying to do this? Well, it's not because they care about our water table. It's because they're trying to increase their profit margin, which is fine, and I don't begrudge them for that. But it's the government's job to protect our county, to protect the citizens. It's not the government's job to increase their profit margins.
Excuse me. Please.
The rule that we've been talking about was disparaged earlier because it's old. It was basically suggested it's anachronistic, that it's a relic, just because it was put in place in 1991. That really struck me as an odd analysis, because the age of a rule does not have anything to do with whether it's a good rule or not. I think everybody in this room thinks that there's a whole lot of rules that were put into place in the 1700s, which are still pretty important for us. So if rules put into place in the United States by our Constitution in the 1700s are important, I don't think anybody should be saying a rule put in place in 1991 is too old, so it's not important anymore. Thank you.
Thank you. Deborah Poulain? Thank you.
So hello, my name is Deborah Poulalian. Nobody can say it.
Okay,
All
thank you.
right.
So I'm not the first.
You are not the first. I live at 1367 Corjesu Court in Longwood, Florida. I am a proud resident of Longwood, and one point I always want to make when I come to the board about the rural boundary is it's not just about the people who live there. This is an issue that's important to all of Seminole County. It's important to all of us to have protections for the natural lands and for those to stay in place and for their property rights to be protected. So I just want to make one last comment about precedent. I found it very interesting that the lawyer commented and said, this will not set a precedent. I'm even going to put it in writing, this will not set a precedent. 5 minutes later, she shows us a slide with 3 other neighborhoods that had water plants. Said, look, our water plant's just like these water plants. It's going to be okay. That's what precedent is all about. And the difference between those 3 plants and now is the future land use plan said, no, we don't want any more water plants. We're saying no. So I found that incredibly ironic. I think this board is taking all these factors into consideration. We appreciate the opportunity to make public comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Roger Chabar.
Roger Tabar.
Good evening, all.
Good evening.
Roger Chawra, 1660 Old Mims Road. Proud resident of Being, Geneva. Ladies and gentlemen, I did some research. I've only lived in the area for about 1.5 years. I came from Washington, D.C., the sprawl of urbanization, the sprawl of decay, and other things, as we've seen on the TV.
Yeah.
I came to this beautiful area where I could smell the fresh air, see the sky, taste the fresh water, and not have to worry about the arsenic, the impurities, lead, etc., etc., etc. With that said, I decided to say, let me have a look at this builder. Let's see if they're honest, or are they playing good brokership? And I found out this builder has got 41 environmental violations, $3 million worth of fines against water, livestock, or whatever the case may be. But that's environmental violations. Do you think they're going to turn their cheek to this subdivision, change their point of view? I say no. I say no. I have a friend who works on the EPA, because I still work up in D.C., and there's over 2,000 private water plant systems throughout the whole United States. There's over 2,000. You'll never guess how many are still in violation on this day that I breathe. 69% are in violation. Do you think the new one is going to make any difference? I say no. I say no, they will continue to be violating. 7% of those ones of the 2,000 have filed bankruptcy within a short period of time being built, because water is more and more expensive, as the honorable gentleman mentioned, where he said the parts to replace a water treatment plant is expensive. They are expensive. I did the Army 23 years. I can tell you the equipment that I ran, it was a water treatment plant. It was expensive. Go Army. With that said, a water plant goes bankrupt, okay? Who picks up the tab? Flint, Michigan. Who picks up the tab? Okay, it's going to be the taxpayer. It's going to be my Genevians over here. My brothers and sisters, the families, they're the ones going to pick up the tab if that doesn't work out very well for it. What does the builder do and the attorney? Hey, I'm going out from the Sunset. I'm going out to Key West. Fire department, taxpayers, who's going to pay for that? The personnel and the equipment. From Geneva, we're going to, or Seminole County. All right? As for the COP, according to District 2 Commission, he said that's going to be reduced.
We got to finish up.
Yes, sir. And I appreciate your time. I hope you give it good consideration to deny this position.
Thank you very much. Is there any other public comments before I close the public comment section? Have you filled out a form? Okay. If you'd like to come up.
My name is Melinda LeMay. I'm at 665 Old Mims Road, Geneva, Florida. My comment is specifically about the water plant, and I live in a rural community. I don't want it to not be rural. That will be right in my backyard. If you lived in the rural community, as some of you do, you wouldn't want that plant in your backyard. It's not rural. The wells, I'm not going to see the wells. I am going to see a water plant. And it's going to affect all the other people that are in the rural community that want not to see the water plant. They don't want to be affected by the water plant. They don't want their water destroyed. And putting it where it is on top of the bubble seems like a really bad idea. I don't feel like their survey of whoever they had engineer it, and I'm sure they paid for that plan to be done, is going to be an accurate one. If we had an independent one done by another engineering firm, perhaps that might be a little more reliable. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to close the public comment portion. Would the applicant like to come up and address some of the comments?
Yes, sir, and Chair, I'll be brief. With regard to being able to see the water plant, the water, as I mentioned, there will be a main well on the northwest, in the northwest portion. And guys, that's just a well. People have said plants and water treatment plants. It's a well, and that water is then moved, and the treatment is a tank, and that tank will be located more central to the property, and you all will see that if approved and comes back with the PSP. This is not a big plant as was maybe mentioned. But let's talk about just quickly the 1991 policy. I don't know if it was created in the 1800s or just last week. I think what we need to look at as to whether or not it is a good rule. The question is, let's judge it by whether or not it does what Mitch Fournier said, and does it protect our water? Is putting in 300 wells going to better protect our water? Is it going to better conserve our water or not? That's really the only question in front of you. And I know that many of the people who spoke are hoping that you can reverse a decision that was made in 2008. That's simply not true. 2008, that decision complied with the comp plan in effect. It currently complies with the comp plan. We are not asking for any future land use map amendments for the 300, nor are we asking for any type of rezoning. I did point out, and I knew when I was creating the slide that someone might point out that, oh, she's trying to say it's a precedent. No, I pointed that out because people stood up here and said, to be rural, you have to have a well. Well, that's not the case. There are maybe almost 800 homes that are within the rural boundary that don't have a well. So I don't think that is what identifies you as being rural or not. As we've said, this development was already approved in 2008. Whether the neighbors believe it or not, we are trying to do what's better for the groundwater. There was an accusation that we're doing this for free, and I just asked, what is the difference in cost, right? What's the difference? So it's not very expensive to go out and drill 300 wells. That would cost between $2 and $3 million for 300 wells. Mm-hmm. To put in this plant is over $5 million. There is not a savings in doing this. That was not the intent, was to save money.
Folks, please.
It's to conserve water and to ensure the quality of that water. I'm happy to answer any questions that you all may have based on what you heard.
I've got one question.
Sure, Chair.
What makes you think that you should be the exception to this rule?
I believe that the only reason we should be the exception to this rule is because there are already 300 houses approved, planned, and coming to the ranch.
Right, but you're trying to be an exception to this rule. They're not.
I don't know who "they" is.
The other treatment, the other systems that are already in Geneva, they're not an exception to the rule.
They are not. They are not, Chair. You are absolutely correct. They were built prior to the 1991 rule being set in place. And I'm actually not asking for an exception, because there's no such thing as an exception to the comprehensive plan. Instead, I am asking that you all at this point transmit and later adopt a new text policy that describes, and I'm sure you saw it, with the 6 different reasons to allow this for this particular piece of property. No one stood up and gave any evidence that the Water Management District was wrong when they said that it's better to have a central water system than 300 wells. No one has disputed that. The last speaker said, you know what, you should take your hydrology report and you should have it reviewed by another engineer. We did that. That engineer was the St. John's Water Management District engineers who reviewed our report, who agreed with our report, who sent correspondence to the county agreeing with the report. So I wouldn't take my word for it. I'm not a hydrologist. Take the Water Management District's word for it. They have the engineers on staff to review this, and they agreed with it.
Okay, so based on what I'm reading and what I've been reading for the last couple of weeks, as far as I'm concerned, why not just put the 300 wells in? Why go through all this?
That is certainly a choice you can make. I feel pretty strongly it would be a really poor decision for the county and the future of its water resource.
Okay,
and we have the evidence that has shown that.
That's fine. Thank you. Do we have any other questions for the applicant?
I did. I guess going back to the cost of creating the water treatment system, you said it's going to cost about $5 million, and so I'm assuming you're getting some kind of a bond to cover the cost of the system, and then have put the paying back of that bond on the shoulders of the 300 residents of the homeowners association over like a 30-year period, or?
No, we are not doing this with any type of CDD financing. This is paid for and placed initially by the developer. It will have a performance bond that would be typical, and as the requested change includes, we also have to show to the satisfaction of your legal department that we have put in place reserves in order to deal with maintenance of the system.
Okay, and then one more question, if I could. Yeah. What's your best argument for satisfying the health condition in the in this ordinance and the criteria?
So we're not stating that we meet that exception to allow a well because there is a health problem that exists. What we're asking to do is create a policy that under these certain circumstances would allow only this, it's known as Creekside or Yarborough, only allow this project to have this well. So we are not claiming that there are issues with existing built systems.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Any questions for staff before we have board discussion?
I do have a question.
Please.
No. Mary, I think, just so I understand, I think you've summed it up pretty well. The comprehensive plan as it exists for a development like this says it will not be designed or constructed with central water systems, period. An exception would be for health, and there's no argument that there's a health reason for a central processing plant. So the applicant is asking us to change the comprehensive code, which controls the nature of the rural area. Is that correct?
Yes, the request is a comprehensive
To
plan
change
text
the code.
amendment. Correct,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah, and I'm very uncomfortable with that.
Okay. All right,
We did
thank-
have a young lady that asked a question earlier that we were going to ask of
Oh, I apologize. I'm so sorry.
the question was, is there guarantees that it...
Will we put it in writing?
That was a question for the applicant.
You don't ask it because you're it was, the question was...
Ms.
from the
Jones, I
applicant,
think.
Ms. Jones?
Is it guaranteed that it's not going to affect her well?
And will they put it in writing?
And would you guys put it in writing, is her question?
So I can tell you that based on our hydrology report, it is better for her wells and others that there be a central water system.
Okay, yeah, no, the young lady is asking if you're willing to put in writing that you guarantee that this well will not affect her wells or anyone else on Snow Hill Road for that
Wait, so
matter.
let me back up. So would she prefer me drill 300 wells and not put anything in writing?
We're just asking a question.
Well, I'm trying to focus this in on what the request is.
So that would be a no.
The request is, I can go drill 300 wells now with no regard to any of the neighbors, no public hearing, and no discussion.
Well, it sounds to me like...
And the science shows that a single well is better than 300. So we believe what we're requesting is superior for her well and others.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Any board discussion before a motion?
I get then one more question of Mary.
Oh, okay.
The plan that they wrote, the amendment for the comprehensive plan, is it written in such a way that it could be used elsewhere?
So this particular language is specific to this property.
Okay, so it's specific to this property. It's not something that three other developers down the road could say, oh, hey, I'm going to use that too.
No, they wrote it specific to the legal description, and there's a map that's also included specific to the property.
Okay. And one more thing, Mary, I just, it's my personal belief that I'm sorry to say that you guys, your staff was very political on this. I want to understand. In last month's staff report, you guys obviously recommended denial based on two things, legal and the environmental aspect. You never even mentioned 1991. Didn't even mention it. So now all of a sudden, this month you found out the environmental got thrown out because your own department said this is a better idea, and legal had nothing to say or object to about this. So you had to come up with something new. You came up with 1991. I still say you never answered my question either. You never talked about whether this really, you looked at whether this benefited our own comprehensive plan of preserving water, preserving the Geneva lands, all the stuff that we say in there that we're doing, trying to do, that this happens to be a better. You're just maybe politically motivated by somewhere higher up that because we have a lot of objectors, that this is the kind of report you guys wrote. And
Folks, please.
That's all. That's just really what I feel. I just don't understand how you couldn't answer my earlier questions and found a way to hang your hat on this 1991 thing, and that's that. And it can't be, you act like it can't even be amended. So, that's all.
Paul, I have a question. If it was adopted, can you tell me that it would not set some type of a legal precedent moving forward, that another developer could not come in and use this in a court of law?
Specifically, and to my knowledge, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mary, there's no other large tracts of property that are similarly situated
I understand that, but if there was another one to come into play at some time in the future, could they not use this in a court?
In my simple mind, the way there's some type of order of magnitude to have a water treatment plant. And again, from the other ones that are out there, it's around 300, more or less. This is 300 units. The way these 300 units were compiled is from the over 6,000 acres in the uplands available, they've collapsed so we have a lot of preserve land that's already in preserve, and then there's the 300 units that have a right to build on Track 3.
That's correct.
Okay, so so this language is geared towards Section 30-109 has already been implemented to allow the clustering. The open space easements are already in place and have been since 2008. And there's the development order and the plat that allow the 300 units. So at this point in time, there's no other similarly situated property in the county that I'm aware of that could condense and utilize that cluster provision to the same effect to get to that 300 units.
Okay, but if it happened in the future, there's a lot of riverfront property that's still available, and St. John's could possibly work the deal with other landowners. If that happened, my question is, could this set a precedent for that land?
I don't think that land exists, Steve.
Well, let me put it this way.
Excuse me, please.
The comprehensive plan is in place, and it does have provisions for amendment for future situations as deemed necessary.
Okay.
So in this particular situation, the request is to allow the central water as opposed to the individual units, which are, the units are a reality. So which is better?
Yeah.
And based on the scientific evidence, they've supplied the study, and the Water Management District has reviewed it. So now it's a policy decision for you and the Board of County Commissioners.
Well, you know, I've had a well for 40 years out in Geneva, so, you know, I've been pretty happy with my wells over time.
So can I say again, can I have the floor again?
Yes, sir.
All right. I might as well get it over with. I mean, the real fight here is everybody here, they just don't want the development. It really has, I don't think it has anything to do with a central water system at all.
Folks, please.
It all has to do with the development, and
They need to be removed.
my thought is, look, if it's going to happen, they're going to build 300 houses here, whether they pound wells or they don't. There's going to be 300 houses here in due time, and that's just the way it is. So my attitude is, well, okay, we got to make this environmentally sound, and I think everything that's been presented made it environmentally sound. It provided a good quality potable drinking water. It avoids, you know, some damage, I think, to the aquifer, and by not pounding 300 wells. It gives some ability to conserve water and control water by monitoring and otherwise. With the St. John's, will be involved in this water plant, trust me. And lastly, it's good for the residents that ultimately live here. They got a chance to have a fire flow operation.
That's folks, please, come on.
So consequently, I'm going to go ahead and make the motion that we recommend the Board of County Commissioners transmit the proposed ordinance, enabling a comprehensive plan and text amendment, amending the text of the future land use and potable water elements of the Seminole County Comprehensive Plan to provide an exception to allow private potable water services for a project outside the urban service area, formerly known as Creekside Acres, now known as Yarborough Ranch. That's.
Well, before we make that motion, I think we need to have a board discussion still.
You can have more discussion after, if I can get a second. Then you can have
I
more
would like
discussion.
to make a comment. I probably would not have been a supporter of the 300 units. I wasn't a supporter of Rivercross when it came in front of this board. But at this time, we can't change that. And I believe that what threatens the rural lifestyle is the development of 300 additional homes, and specifically the clustering. It's not really how the water is going to be brought to those homes. We're availed today of additional information, new research, more innovation, and we have a hydrological study that's been reviewed by Environmental Protection, Environmental Services, Fire Protection, St. John's Water Management District, and all of them have said that from what we know today, this is a more environmentally sensitive way to do it. It'll protect our environment. I don't think that it sets a precedent. I think that there's 3 existing central water systems like this that have already set the precedent. So I would be a supporter of this item, and I'd like to second the motion.
Board discussion?
Yeah, I don't understand the motivation of the builder to build a central water plant system that's going to cost more money. Obviously, it's to defer the expense of that to the homeowners. I don't believe that the water treatment plants are viable. I don't think they're self-sustaining monetarily. I think the homeowners are not going to be able to maintain this. Yes, the St. John's Water Management and all the environmental stuff is going to have to be kept up, and everybody's got to meet the rules. But when the builder walks away, the homeowners are going to be held responsible for this water management system. And he's even, I agree, most of those go defunct and are bankrupt, and then who takes the bill? And that's going to be us, the tax holders. And let me finish, Richard.
Yeah, that's all right.
So the motivation of the builder was very skeptical to me. Individual, I've lived on a well. I have 2 houses. Both of them are on well. I have no issue with my water. I treat my own water. And I don't believe that it's going to make that big of a difference in how much water usage. The people are going to use the water, whether it's coming out of their well or it's coming out of a water treatment plant, whether they're paying for it or they're not paying for it. They're going to use it. So I don't think the usage of water is going to be the issue. I really don't. I don't like the water treatment plant if in the rural area, if the rule was set, there was a reason it was set, and I agree with the rule, and I would say no.
I'm going to...
Walter, if I just, could I?
Yeah, sure,
answer your
please.
question?
Absolutely, that's what the discussion.
There are 3 other water plants that have supported themselves and are still functioning, and the county hasn't had to step in and do it. And beyond that, I know there, and I should have, if I had the demographics, I'd bring it to you, there's plenty of private water plants around that the homeowners that are involved support. And in further answer to your question, I wouldn't mind living here, and I like the idea of having quality water, not worrying about a well that I'm going to have to test all the time and worry about, having some fire flow. I like that. That would make it more marketable to me. That's why I think they are ready to spend the money, if I'm wrong, if I'm not wrong.
I don't agree with their motivation.
Okay.
And I think I'm very skeptical of it.
Yeah.
So and as far as I don't have fire hydrants near my house. We had one of our houses, we got rained in just like everybody else. We all survived the hurricane just like everybody did. And we had a house burned down right next door to us. Couldn't get to it because they couldn't move the power lines. The power lines were all down, and they couldn't get to it to save the house. So what do they bring in? They bring in water trucks, and each one of those big fire trucks from Seminole County comes out, it's got 4,000 gallons of water in it to stop a fire. And that's what they brought in, and they put the fire out. But, as far as living off of grid, that's the rural lifestyle, and that if they're going to build houses out in the rural community, that's what the amendment was for in 91, was we were going to live a rural lifestyle. You're going to have a well, and you're going to have septic, and you're going to have to maintain it. You have to meet all the guidelines, and this is your property. You manage it. That's the rural lifestyle, and that's what this is about. And if you want to live on a water treatment plant, then buy in Sanford. You want to live on a well, buy in Chiliota, That's what she says.
I think call for a roll call vote on this one. So, Walter?
I'm a no.
Tim?
Yes.
Dan?
No.
Yes.
No?
No.
Yes.
Been defeated. All right.
Need another motion.
Yeah, I believe it would need another.
Oh, a motion to actually approve it? So I'll
Mr.
make a
Chairman.
motion.
You can't leave.
Recommend that the Board of County Commissioners deny transmittal of the proposed ordinance, enacting a comprehensive plan text amendment, amending the text of the future land use and potable water elements of the Seminole County Comprehensive Plan to provide an exception to allow private potable water services for a project outside the urban service area formerly known as Creekside Acres, now known as Yarborough Ranch.
I second.
Roll call, Richard?
Well, you got to have a second.
I second.
Second. Okay, I got a second.
Mr. Chairman?
Roll call?
No.
Yes.
Just to be real clear and state the obvious, a vote of yes is to deny the transmittal, a vote of no is to object to the motion
To
to
the motion.
deny.
Yeah.
Okay, just want to be clear.
It's been a long night, but I think we'll get
So Richard's a no.
Yes.
Bob is a yes. I'm a yes. Clarissa?
No.
Dan? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Motion carries 4-3. To deny. You're welcome. And staff, do you have anything?
Just real quick, some upcoming meetings. So on October 11th, we will be having the final, I promise, work session for the LDC amendments. And
Okay.
hopefully.
You promise.
I promise. No more work sessions. And then
Okay.
coming back to the boards for adoption probably early next year.
Okay.
And then also the Envision Seminole transmittal to the state will be November 15th at the
Okay, great.
Mary, one other thing. Would you guys work on, I know the hurricane caused problems getting the package out this time, okay? But it's a lot to print, and it's a lot to read. And last month's was really late also. And it seems like we're kind of the last, thought of last, and we get it a day before or something. Can we do a little better?
We're trying, yes, we hear that, absolutely.
I know, and sometimes the staff report's changing it, but
Even if we have to do it by vote. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Good job.